I noticed at the moment she reached into her purse to grab her phone. The ring was missing, the gold band she never took off, not even the shower or while sleeping. It should have been there, snug on her finger like it had been every day for the last 12 years. But tonight it wasn't. We were at that little wine bar downtown, a place she said was perfect for catching up with friends. I didn't want to be the jealous husband. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she forgot it or took it off because it was uncomfortable. But I knew better. That small, silent absence was a crack in the facade I'd trusted for years. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask where it was or why. Instead, I stayed quiet, watching her as she laughed and leaned into the conversations. There was something different in the way she moved, a subtle distance, like she was already somewhere else, emotionally checked out. I kept my phone in my pocket, waiting for a moment when she wasn't looking. Then I saw it, a quick glance at her screen, a text message popping up that wasn't meant for me. The words hit me harder than any confrontation could have. Can't wait to see you tonight. I took a screenshot, not because I wanted to fight, but because I needed to hold on to the truth before it slipped away. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't yell or beg. I sent the screenshot, silent, cold, and deliberate, with no explanation. Just a picture and a simple message. We need to talk. Her response came hours later, filled with panic and excuses, but I stayed calm. I had already started down a path where words wouldn't matter as much as facts. This wasn't just about a ring. It was about everything I thought we were and would have been broken long before that night. And I was done pretending I didn't see it. After sending that screenshot, I didn't expect an immediate answer, and I didn't get one. The silence was worse than any excuse she could have thrown at me. It wasn't the first time I'd felt the distance growing between us, but now I couldn't ignore it. In the days that followed, I watched her more closely, quietly piecing together the fragments she left behind. The little changes, the half-truths, the sudden secrecy about her phone. I saw she shifted when I came into the room, like she was holding something back or someone. I didn't confront her directly. Instead, I kept the screenshot close, a reminder of what I needed to uncover. There were subtle signs, small moments that confirmed what I feared. The late nights out with friends that never included me. The vague excuses when I asked simple questions. The text that she'd hastily close when I walked by. It was as if she was already living two lives. One with me, the husband I thought I knew, and another with people I didn't even recognize. And that ring, the absence of it, felt like a symbol, a sign that what I believed was real was slipping through my fingers. But I didn't let anger take over. I couldn't afford that. This wasn't a moment for shouting matches or breaking things. This was a mission, and I needed to stay calm, focused. So I kept my mouth shut and watched. I reached out to a few friends I trusted, carefully, without revealing everything. Their words only confirmed my suspicions. Things weren't right. They told me stories I hadn't heard, things she had said when I wasn't around. Pieces of a puzzle I was starting to fit together, even if the full picture was still out of reach. I was angry, yes, but more than that, I was hurt. Hurt that she felt she couldn't be honest with me. Hurt that everything I thought we shared was unraveling in silence. Still, I waited. I didn't confront, because I knew that when the time came, I needed the truth on my side, not my rage. There was no turning back once I took that screenshot. It wasn't just a random capture. It was the first undeniable proof that the life I thought we had was cracking under the surface. The text lit up her phone. Can't wait to see you tonight. No sender ID. No context. But I knew exactly what it meant. I saved it immediately, knowing this single image would be my anchor through the storm. The moment I saw it, everything shifted. It was no longer about suspicion or hope. It was about evidence. A silent truth that couldn't be denied or dismissed with half-hearted apologies. But I didn't send it right away. Not because I doubted it, but because I needed to prepare. I couldn't afford to be impulsive. This wasn't just about catching her out. It was about taking back control of a situation that was spinning wildly out of reach. I replayed that moment in my mind over and over. The way she laughed with her friends, the way her hand was bare, the careless betrayal hidden in plain sight. I thought about all the times I ignored the warning signs, brushed off my gut, told myself it was nothing. I had to accept that I was wrong. When I finally sent the screenshot, it was quiet, deliberate, a calculated move rather than a cry for confrontation. Just the image, nothing else. I wanted her to know I saw the truth without giving her a chance to gaslight me or twist the narrative. Her reply was almost immediate. Panicked texts, pleas, half-truths, and excuses. She begged for understanding, painted the situation as a misunderstanding. But I wasn't interested in words anymore. I was watching actions, waiting for proof. The screenshot was the line drawn in the sand. It was proof I could lean on when everything else felt like it was slipping away. In that moment, I understood that what we had was over. The life we built was crumbling not with a bang, but with silent messages, hidden texts, and a ring left on the table. And I was ready, not for forgiveness or reconciliation, but for the fight ahead, quiet, calculated, and relentless. After sending that screenshot, I felt a strange calm wash over me. It was a moment of clarity, a pivot from raw emotion to cold calculation. I didn't want to scream or storm out. I didn't want to beg or plead. I wanted control over a situation that had been unraveling for far too long. I spent that night awake, replaying every moment that had led to this. Every small lie, every absence, every cold glance. The ring missing was just the final symptom of something deeper. I knew reacting impulsively wouldn't fix anything. It would only give her the upper hand. Instead, I held back. I stayed silent, observing. I watched how she moved, how she spoke, and how she tried to cover the cracks. I gathered evidence piece by piece, text messages, phone calls, unexplained absences. Every detail was a puzzle piece, and I was determined to see the full picture before making my move. Friends asked if I was going to confront her, but I didn't want to. Confrontation felt like giving in to emotion. What I needed was strategy. I wanted her to realize the consequences of her actions, not just through words, but through undeniable proof. I began documenting everything meticulously. Screenshots of messages, timestamps of suspicious calls, receipts from places she never mentioned. This wasn't about revenge fueled by anger. It was about reclaiming my dignity and protecting myself from further deception. Part of me was broken, the part that believed in us and the promises made. But the other part was sharper now, more aware. It knew that sometimes silence speaks louder than any accusation. That withholding words can be more powerful than shouting them. I wasn't ready to fight in public yet. This was my war, and I was choosing when and how to fight. Patience was my weapon and preparation my shield. I reminded myself, this wasn't just about what she had done. It was about what I was going to do next, how I was going to reclaim my life on my own terms. And I was ready to wait, ready to plan, ready to take back what was mine. After hours of silent tension, I finally sent her the message that set everything in motion. Not a confrontation or accusation, but the screenshot itself, a cold, quiet statement of what I knew. Along with it, just 4 simple words: we need to talk. No blam, no anger. Just a clear line drawn between what was and what had become. I waited, watching my phone as if it could tell me what would come next. Minutes ticked by, then an hour, then more. The silence was heavy, and I knew she was reading and rereading that message, trying to figure out what I really knew. I wasn't about to give her that satisfaction. When her reply finally came, it was frantic and defensive. "It's not what you think," she wrote, a phrase so hollow it almost sounded rehearsed. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Please just listen." I read her words over and over, but they didn't calm the storm inside me. They didn't erase the months of lies, the stolen moments, or the way she took off that ring like it was a burden she no longer wanted to bear. Her excuses felt like smoke, there to obscure the fire but not to put it out. Instead of responding, I stayed quiet. I let her try to explain herself while I gathered strength. This wasn't a conversation to be had in haste or anger. It was a reckoning that needed patience and precision. Over the next days, she sent more messages, apologies, pleas, promises. But with every word, my resolve only grew stronger. This wasn't about reconciliation anymore. It was about truth, about uncovering everything that had been hidden beneath the surface. I knew the path ahead would be hard, lonely even. But for the first time in a long while, I felt in control. Not because I was angry or vengeful, but because I had chosen to face the truth head on. And now, there was no going back. Her reaction after receiving the screenshot was immediate. But it wasn't the furious denial I'd expected. Instead, it was a fragile, trembling attempt to hold herself together. I watched from a distance as the confident woman I'd known began to unravel. In the days that followed, her smiles were forced, laughter brittle. The phone call she once answered eagerly became short and distracted. When we were in the same room, there was an unspoken tension thick enough to cut through. She avoided my eyes like I was a stranger exposing her secrets. I noticed the small cracks, the way her hands shook slightly when she thought no one was looking, how she fidgeted when I mentioned nothing but everything. The strong woman I loved was now a ghost of herself, carrying the weight of her choices in silence. But I didn't let my guard down. Her crumbling facade only confirmed what I already suspected. The betrayal was real, and her guilt was genuine. Yet, guilt didn't erase the damage done. I stayed calm, patient. There was no point in gloating or rubbing it in. My silence was louder than any accusation. I let her anxiety build as she realized I wasn't just hurt. I was prepared. Her desperation grew. I saw it in the hurried texts, the late-night calls she made to friends who didn't want to get involved, the vague promises she muttered under her breath. She was trying to find a way out of the mess she'd created, but I was closing in with every quiet step I took. Watching her crumble wasn't satisfying. It was painful. It was the final proof that our marriage had fractured beyond repair. But it was also the moment I knew that the next chapter was mine to write. I wasn't the one falling apart. I was the one standing strong, and I intended to stay that way. After her cracks began to show, I found more pieces of the puzzle she thought she'd hidden well. What I uncovered shocked me. Messages that didn't match her explanations, receipts for dinners and hotels she never mentioned, even phone calls she'd tried to erase from her history. Every discovery was another thread unraveling the tapestry of lies she'd woven around us. The more I looked, the clearer it became that this wasn't a fleeting mistake or a moment of weakness. It was calculated, deliberate, and ongoing. I started documenting everything meticulously. Screenshots, recordings, timestamps. I became obsessed with the details. I needed proof strong enough to protect myself, strong enough to keep her from rewriting the story as the victim. I reached out to old friends quietly, people I trusted to help me fill in gaps without raising suspicion. Their accounts confirmed what I feared. She'd been living a double life for months. It stung more than I expected, not just because of the betrayal, but because it showed how well she'd hidden the truth from me, the man she'd promised to stand by. But with every secret I unraveled, my resolve hardened. I wasn't just going to sit back and be the fool. I was gathering my weapons for a battle I had no choice but to win. This wasn't about revenge alone. It was about reclaiming my dignity and securing the life I deserved, no matter what it took. I would let the secrets unravel until there was nothing left for her to hide. And then, I would make sure the truth was impossible to ignore. In the midst of my silent investigation, I realized I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone who knew both of us, someone who could offer insight, perspective, and maybe even a little leverage. I reached out cautiously to an old friend of hers, someone I knew she trusted. I didn't reveal everything, but enough to gauge loyalty and find out what she really knew. To my surprise, this confidant wasn't blind to the cracks. She admitted that she had noticed changes in my wife's behavior. Late nights, secret calls, sudden mood swings. But more than that, she revealed the loneliness my wife had been masking and the desperation that had pushed her into decisions she regretted. This wasn't just a betrayal of me, the confidant explained, but a betrayal of herself. It painted a picture I hadn't expected, one of pain hidden beneath the lies. I listened quietly, absorbing the truth in a new light. This didn't excuse what happened, but it helped me understand the person behind the betrayal. I asked the confidant to keep our conversations private, knowing the fragile balance I was walking between exposure and discretion. I also asked for her help in gently coaxing my wife to face the reality she'd been avoiding. It was a risk, trusting someone so close to her, but I needed allies. And if there was even a chance to turn this around, for me, for us, I had to try. The confidant became my quiet partner in this fight, a link to a world I was no longer fully a part of, and a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles are won not with anger, but with understanding. I still had a long road ahead, but with someone watching my back, I wasn't walking alone. I knew the truth wouldn't reveal itself in loud confrontations or desperate pleas. It had to be uncovered quietly, piece by piece, like a puzzle with too many missing parts. So I kept my distance, watching, listening, and collecting evidence without raising suspicion. Every time she left the house claiming to meet friends, I tracked her carefully, not in a way that felt invasive, but with the precision of someone who needed answers more than drama. I checked phone records, cross-referenced locations, and paid close attention to any slips or inconsistencies. One evening, I noticed her texting a number saved under a fake name. A quick search revealed it belonged to someone I never expected, an old acquaintance, someone whose presence in her life raised alarm bells I couldn't ignore. I started piecing together what I knew about this person, his habits, his reputation, the rumors whispered in places I hadn't visited for years. It wasn't a surprise to find he had a history of manipulation and lies, but it was a blow to realize how deeply my wife had gotten involved. I kept screenshots, recorded times she was unreachable, documented strange expenses on our joint account. The more I found, the more I understood that this was not a casual mistake, but a deep betrayal. Still, I never confronted her directly. I couldn't. Not until I had enough proof to stand on solid ground. I needed a strategy, not a fight. At times, I felt like a detective in my own life, uncovering clues about a woman I thought I knew inside and out. It was exhausting but necessary. I reminded myself that patience was key, that the truth, once fully exposed, would be undeniable and final. This quiet investigation was no longer about her or even about us. It was about protecting myself and deciding the life I was willing to fight for. And no matter how painful the process, I was ready to see it through to the end. The turning point came unexpectedly, like a sudden crack in a dam holding back months of deception. It wasn't a loud confrontation or a dramatic confession. It was a simple text message that changed everything. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a notification. A photo, blurry, taken in secret, showing her with someone new, someone not me. That image shattered whatever hope I had left. The date stamp was recent, and the location was one I hadn't heard her mention. My heart sank, but my mind sharpened. This was no longer suspicion or doubt. This was proof, clear and undeniable. I kept my cool. Instead of reacting impulsively, I forwarded the message to my attorney, signaling that this was the moment to take action. From that point on, I no longer held back. I had the evidence and the will to use it. I prepared myself mentally for the conversations to come, the difficult talks with family, the heartbreak, the inevitable fallout. But beneath it all, I felt something new, empowerment. For the first time in months, I wasn't at the mercy of lies. I had the truth in my hands, and with it, I knew I could start a rebuild. The turning point wasn't just about ending what was broken. It was about beginning something better. Once the truth started to surface, she shifted into damage control mode. I could see it clearly, the frantic calls, the desperate apologies, the attempts to rewrite the story. She tried to explain the absence of her ring as a coincidence, brushed off the texts as misunderstandings, and insisted she still cared. But I wasn't fooled. I listened, but I didn't engage emotionally. Instead, I kept my distance, letting her words hang in the air without giving them weight. Her friends started to notice her change, the way she guarded her phone and avoided my questions. Rumors began to swirl, whispers spreading quietly among those we once trusted. She tried to rally support, portraying herself as the victim of misunderstandings and mistrust. But the facts I held spoke louder than any excuse. I kept documenting everything, knowing that this phase was just another tactic in a long game. The real battle wasn't with her words, but with the undeniable evidence I had gathered. and no amount of damage control could undo what was already done. My resolve only strengthened. This was no longer a private matter. It was a fight for my future, and I was ready to win. I knew I couldn't navigate this alone any longer. The betrayal was deep, the web of lies too tangled, and I needed professional guidance to protect what was mine. So, I made the call, the first of many to come. Sitting alone in my living room, phone pressed to my ear, I tried to steady my voice as I explained the situation. The attorney listened quietly, letting me lay out every painful detail, the missing ring, the secret texts, the mounting evidence. I didn't spare a single thing. He didn't offer empty comfort or quick fixes. Instead, he gave me clarity. He explained my rights, the importance of documenting everything, and the legal steps I could take to safeguard myself. It was sobering but empowering. Suddenly, the chaos had a framework, a roadmap to follow. I wasn't helpless anymore. He advised me to keep gathering evidence, to avoid confrontations that could jeopardize my case, and most importantly, to think strategically. He warned me the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be emotional tolls and legal battles, but he assured me I was not alone. Hearing that gave me a strange strength. I realized this wasn't just about anger or heartbreak. It was about survival. I scheduled a follow-up meeting to go over everything in detail and started organizing what I had collected. Screenshots, messages, receipts, everything was compiled with care. That night, I felt a flicker of hope for the first time in months. The battle was far from over, but I had a plan. I had an ally. Making that first lawyer call was a turning point, not just legally, but mentally. It marked the moment I stopped feeling like a victim and started preparing to reclaim my life. I knew the fights ahead would test me in ways I hadn't imagined, but I was ready, because this wasn't just about what she had done. It was about who I was going to become. With legal counsel at my side, the next weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. I went through every piece of evidence I'd quietly collected, turning chaos into clarity. Every message, every suspicious expense, every lie became a thread in the tapestry of my case. I meticulously organized everything: digital folders, printed documents, timelines. I wanted no detail overlooked. The more I prepared, the more control I felt slipping back into my hands. There were nights I barely slept, going over conversations in my mind, replaying moments that had once hurt me deeply. But this time, I wasn't drowning in pain. I was calculating my next steps. I consulted my attorney regularly, learning what questions to ask and how to anticipate her moves. We discussed strategies to protect my assets and ensure fairness in what would surely be a messy unraveling. Preparing my case wasn't just about the law. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I knew that the battle wasn't just in courtrooms, but in my mind and heart. Each piece of evidence was a shield, each plan a weapon. I was no longer waiting for answers. I was creating them. And with every day, I felt stronger. No longer the man blindsided by betrayal. I was becoming someone who would stand tall, no matter the outcome. In the darkest moments, when trust felt scarce, an unexpected ally emerged. It wasn't someone I predicted, nor someone I sought out initially, but their support became a lifeline. A mutual friend, someone who had witnessed the cracks in our relationship long before I did, reached out quietly. They didn't judge or meddle. Instead, they offered insights, confirmations, and sometimes just a listening ear. This friend provided me with pieces of information I hadn't known, conversations, observations, even texts that helped fill in blanks and solidify my understanding of what was really happening. More importantly, they reminded me I wasn't alone, that even in betrayal, there were people who cared and wanted to see justice. Their support gave me renewed strength to push forward, to face the battles ahead with a clear mind and a guarded heart. It was a reminder that sometimes help comes from where you least expect it, and that accepting it doesn't make you weak. With this unexpected ally, my fight no longer felt like a solitary battle. It was a collective stand for truth, dignity, and a better future. The weight of betrayal doesn't just break trust, it shatters the very core of who you think you are. In the weeks following the first undeniable proof, the emotional fallout hit me hard. harder than I expected. Some days, I woke up feeling numb, as if the man I used to be had been erased overnight. The loneliness was crushing. Even when surrounded by friends or family, I felt isolated, caught between heartbreak and the cold necessity of fighting back. I struggled with anger, not just at her, but at myself. How'd I miss the signs? How had I let this happen? The questions circled endlessly in my mind, sometimes waking me in the dead of night. But amid the pain, there were moments of surprising clarity. I began to understand that my identity wasn't tied to this broken relationship. I was more than a husband betrayed. I was a man capable of standing tall in the face of devastation. There were days when the tears came unbidden, silent reminders of the love I once believed in and the loss I was forced to accept. I let myself feel those moments fully, knowing the denial would only delay healing. Still, beneath the sorrow was a growing resolve. I realized that this emotional chaos was part of the process, a necessary storm before I could rebuild. I wasn't just mourning the past. I was preparing to reclaim my future. Therapy sessions became a refuge, a place to untangle the mess inside, to learn how to forgive myself, and to find strength in vulnerability. I discovered that healing wasn't linear. It came in fits and starts, with setbacks and breakthroughs. Friends who stayed by my side reminded me I was not defined by this betrayal. Their support, small acts of kindness, helped fill the void when I felt lost. Most importantly, I learned to be patient with myself, to allow the pain to exist without letting it consume me. The emotional fallout was brutal, but it was also transformative. It forced me to confront who I was and who I wanted to become. And in that reckoning, I found the first seeds of hope. The breakthrough didn't come with fanfare or dramatic confessions. Instead, it arrived quietly, almost unexpectedly, like a slow dawn breaking through a long night of doubt and pain. Weeks into my quiet investigation, a message slipped through her carefully guarded defenses, a text conversation I hadn't seen before, revealing plans she'd kept hidden, evidence that confirmed everything I'd feared and then some. This was the final proof I needed, the piece that made everything undeniable. I stared at the screen, the weight of that message settling over me. There was no longer any room for denial, for excuses. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was calculated and ongoing. With this breakthrough, the fog of uncertainty lifted, replaced by a sharp focus. I realized the fight ahead was no longer about questioning what was real, but about how I would respond. I called my attorney immediately and sent the new evidence. We discussed the implications, the next legal steps, and how to protect myself fully. The breakthrough gave me leverage I hadn't had before. On a personal level, it was liberating. Finally, the truth was out in the open, and I could stop questioning myself or doubting my instincts. That alone brought a profound relief. Emotionally, it was still difficult. The knowledge confirmed what I dreaded, but also empowered me to move forward with confidence rather than confusion. I began sharing select details with a trusted confidant, someone who helped me keep perspective and strength. I found that the more I spoke honestly about what I'd uncovered, the lighter the burden felt. This breakthrough wasn't the end of the battle, but it was the turning point. From this moment on, I knew I had the truth firmly in my hands, and with it, the power to reclaim my life. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing to take control and write the next chapter on my terms. With the breakthrough behind me, I realized something crucial. Silence was my greatest weapon. I didn't need to shout or plead. I didn't need to confront her with accusations or rage. Instead, I let the evidence speak for itself, quietly, steadily, and with unshakable strength. Every text, every secret meeting, every lie was documented and ready. But I chose to hold my tongue in public, to keep my composure in private. I learned that power isn't about loud declarations. It's about controlled restraint. When she tried to spin stories or paint me as the villain, I didn't respond. When friends and family whispered or asked questions, I gave measured answers, never betraying the storm raging inside. That silence created space, space for her to falter and for others to see the truth through cracks in her facade. I saw the subtle shifts in how people treated me. Respect replaced doubt. Sympathy replaced suspicion. My calm became a quiet testimony to my integrity and resolve. It wasn't easy. Holding back anger and hurt felt like carrying a heavy weight. But I understood that each moment of silence was a step toward victory, a way to maintain dignity and control over a situation that threatened to consume me. This silent power was not passive. It was deliberate. It was a statement that I would not be baited or broken. I was choosing my battles carefully, knowing that when I finally spoke, my voice would carry the full weight of truth and justice. In this silence, I found strength I didn't know I had. It was the calm before the storm, the quiet assurance that I was no longer the victim, but the architect of my own fate. And that power would carry me through the darkest days ahead. For months, she wore her mask flawlessly, smiling at gatherings, playing the devoted wife for friends and family, hiding the cracks beneath carefully crafted lies. But even the strongest masks eventually shatter. I watched as the weight of deception began to erode her carefully maintained facade. At first, it was subtle, hesitations in her speech, nervous glances when I entered a room, small slip-ups that betrayed the stress she carried inside. Then came the whispered questions from friends, the concerned looks exchanged behind her back. People started noticing inconsistencies between her words and actions. The distance in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. It was a slow unraveling, but I saw it clearly. Her public persona, once so confident and composed, was crumbling under the pressure of secrets she could no longer keep hidden. I didn't need to say a word. The truth was speaking louder than any denial she could offer. Her attempts to maintain control only hastened her downfall. The more she tried to cover up, the more the cracks deepened, until there was no hiding the truth. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness watching this. Satisfaction that justice, in its own time, was unfolding. Sadness for the woman she had become. The distance between who she was and who she once claimed to be. But this was no longer about her. It was about me reclaiming my life and my dignity. Her mask cracking was a sign that the power was shifting. The silence I'd held was now filled with anticipation. The stage was set for the next act, the public reckoning where truth could no longer be denied. And when that moment came, I would be ready to stand tall, unbroken, unshaken, and finally free. The day I filed the papers, I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. Relief because I was finally taking control, turning months of pain and suspicion into decisive action. Dread because I knew this step marked the true end of a life we had built together. I remember sitting at the attorney's office, hands trembling slightly as I signed the documents. It was more than paperwork. It was a statement, a declaration that I would no longer be silent or sidelined. The filing was formal, clinical even, but the weight behind it was anything but. It symbolized a shift from quiet investigation to open confrontation, from private grief to public process. I thought about how she would react when she received the notice, the sudden clarity it would bring, the walls closing in. But I didn't send it to hurt her. I sent it to protect myself. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The phone calls, the legal meetings, the cautious conversations became the new normal. I braced myself for the inevitable battles, over property, finances, and emotions that had been buried too long. Friends and family heard the news in whispers. Some offered support, others expressed shock. But I kept my head down, focused on the path ahead. This was no longer just personal. It was legal, procedural, final. I learned that courage wasn't about never feeling fear. It was about moving forward despite it. Filing the papers was the first official step in reclaiming my life. And though the road would be rough, I was determined to walk it with integrity and strength. This chapter was ending, and a new one was beginning, one I would write on my own terms. Once the divorce papers were filed, the storm I'd been bracing for hit with full force. Suddenly, the whispers turned into conversations, the glances became pointed questions, and the private pain spilled into the public eye. Friends and family split in their loyalties. Some offered quiet support, understanding the truth behind the headlines. Others kept their distance, uncomfortable with the mess that had been revealed. The social circles we once moved in felt fractured, and I found myself navigating a minefield of emotions and opinions. At work, I kept my focus, but even there, the news had traveled. Colleagues who once greeted me warmly now exchanged awkward looks. I was no longer just a professional, but a man publicly unraveling. The hardest part was the emotional toll. Each new rumor, every judgment passed, felt like a fresh wound. But through it all, I reminded myself why I had started this journey. Not for revenge, but for truth and freedom. I learned quickly that facing the storm meant standing firm amid chaos. It meant choosing dignity over bitterness, resilience over despair. When conversations turned harsh or accusatory, I held my ground calmly. I refused to engage in petty arguments or respond to provocations. My silence was my shield. Even on the toughest days, I reminded myself that this was temporary, that storms pass and clear skies return. I found strength in small victories, a supportive text from a friend, a moment of peace after a difficult conversation, the steady progress in legal proceedings. Facing the storm wasn't easy. It tested every ounce of my patience and courage, but it also revealed who I truly was beneath the pain. And in that revelation, I found a quiet power. The storm raged around me, but I stood unbroken, ready for whatever came next. Negotiations began quietly, but with an intensity that surprised me.